The Apostle Paul stated these words in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Ministers of Satan attempt to rob the people of God through lying about Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. And they tell the people of God that they have robbed God, when in actuality, it is the false teachers themselves who have robbed God through lying about Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, in order to make money off of the backs of the precious people of God. Are you with me here today? The false teachers have caused multitudes of people to undergo numerous financial hardships that could have been avoided if the people knew that they were being lied to about Malachi chapter 3, verse 10 by the false teachers. Malachi chapter 3, verse 10 have been used by false teachers to get a tenth of the Christian's income for generations. But now the people of God know the truth about the tithe, so the false teachers' time of deceiving the people of God is over. Remember, brothers and sisters, the defining factor for absolute truth is the Word of God. And when people take the Word of God out of context, they make it a pretext for false doctrine, which is what numerous so-called preachers throughout the world are doing. The book of Malachi was written around 430 BC to 420 BC. That's when it was written, around 430 BC to 420 BC. And the content of the book of Malachi shows that the temple had been rebuilt, which happened in the year 516 BC to 515 BC. The book of Malachi shows that the Levitical priests and the Levites were handling all matters related to the temple as commanded by God, and the sacrifices and feasts had been reinstituted. The general knowledge of the law had been reintroduced to the people through Ezra in the years 457 BC to 455 BC, which can be found in Ezra chapter 7, verses 10, 14, 25, and 26. The book of Malachi shows that the Levitical priest had backslid, and it also shows that the Israelites had backslid, which occurred around the year 433 BC. The Levitical priest had become corrupt, as well as the Israelites had become corrupt. The Levitical priests were offering blemish sacrifices, and the Israelites were neglecting the tithes that they were required to give the Levites as their inheritance, of which the Levites were to offer a tenth or tithe of the tithes that they received from the Israelites to the Lord. The Israelites were neglecting offerings also, and the marriage covenant was being violated when the Israelite men began marrying pagan women. Now, as I've stated before, a lot of so-called Christian preachers throughout the years have been using Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 to generate a Sunday paycheck for themselves at the expense of the people of God, and they are going to have to answer for it. They're not getting away with anything. They're going to have to answer for it. Let's look at the verse out of Malachi that the Sunday paycheck preachers use, which they will have to answer for. Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 reads, "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it." Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 is for the Israelites who had neglected giving the tithe of their produce of the land and livestock to the Levites as commanded by God. And the Levites were to offer a tithe or tenth of what they received to the Lord as the Lord's portion. And Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 is not talking about cash money, it's talking about food. So let's read Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 again. It reads, "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it." Now, for those of you who have been following our messages, you know exactly what I'm about to say. The word meat in Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 is the word tithe in the Hebrew, which is defined as food. The word meat, brothers and sisters, in Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 is the word tithe in the Hebrew, which is defined as food. In Malachi chapter 3 verse 10, God tells all of the Israelites through the prophet Malachi to bring all of their tithes of their produce of the land and livestock into the storehouse so that there may be food in the Lord's house, which is exactly what the Israelites were supposed to do. And the food that the Israelites supplied through their tithes fed the Levites, the strangers, the fatherless, and the widows, as stated in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 28 and 29, which reads, "At the end of 3 years thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, and shall lay it up within thy gates. And the Levite, because he hath no part nor inheritance with thee, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hand which thou doest." Leviticus chapter 27 verses 30 through 32 states, "And all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy unto the Lord. And if a man will at all redeem aught of his tithes, he shall add thereto the fifth part thereof. And concerning the tithe of the herd or of the flock, even of whatsoever passeth under the rod, the tenth shall be holy unto the Lord." The tithe in Malachi chapter 3 verses 6 through 12 is a food tithe, and it had nothing to do with cash money like Sunday paycheck preachers have been lying to you brothers and sisters about for generations. The Israelites were robbing God by neglecting the command of giving the tithes of their produce of the land and livestock to the Levites as commanded by God in Exodus chapter 23 verse 19, Leviticus chapter 27 verses 30 through 34, Numbers chapter 18 verse 12, Numbers chapter 18 verses 20 through 28, and Deuteronomy chapter 26. And just as the Israelites neglected the tithes that they were required to give the Levites in Malachi chapter 3 verse 10, the prophet Nehemiah dealt with issues of the Israelites neglecting the tithes that they were required to give the Levites in Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 10 through 13. Nehemiah left Persia for Jerusalem in 444 BC to serve as governor of Judah. And he found that the Israelites had neglected the tithes that they were required to give the Levites as their inheritance. And Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 10 through 13 deals with it. And this is Nehemiah speaking. These verses read, "And I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them, for the Levites and the singers that did the work were fled every one to his field. Then contended I with the rulers and said, Why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn and the new wine and the oil unto the treasuries. And I made treasurers over the treasuries, Shelemiah the priest, and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites, Pedaiah, and next to them was Hanan, the son of Zechar, the son of Mattaniah. For they were counted faithful, and their office was to distribute unto the brethren. Now, what Nehemiah is saying in these verses is in verse 10, he learned that the portions assigned to the Levites had not been given to them. And the Levites and singers responsible for the service had gone back to their own fields. So in verse 11, Nehemiah states that he contended with the rulers and asked them, why is the house of God forsaken? And then Nehemiah states that then he gathered them together and set them in their place. Or in other words, Nehemiah stationed them at their posts. And then verse 12 states that all Judah brought the tithe of the corn and the new wine and the oil unto the treasuries, which the word treasuries in this verse in the Hebrew is defined as storehouse, which the storehouse is where the tithes were placed. And after all Judah brought the tithe, in verse 13, Nehemiah states that he put Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and a Levite named Pedaiah in charge of the treasuries, or in other words, the storehouse. And he made Hanan, the son of Zakur, the son of Mattaniah, their assistant, because these men were counted faithful. And verse 13 ends by Nehemiah stating that the office of these men was to distribute unto their brethren. Or in other words, these men were made responsible for distributing to the brethren. So you see the connection, brothers and sisters. Nehemiah dealt with the same situation that Malachi dealt with. And remember what Malachi said to the Israelites in Malachi chapter 3 verse 10. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And this is the same thing that Nehemiah dealt with in Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 10 through 13. The Israelites were neglecting the tithes that they were required to give the Levites, which would be placed in the storehouse in order that there may be food in God's house. Are you with me? The book of Nehemiah begins with a prayer for the Israelites in Nehemiah chapter 1 verses 1 through 11. And in verse 6, Nehemiah states these words in his prayer. Let thine ear now be attentive and thine eyes open, that thou mayest hear the prayer of thy servant, which I pray before thee now, day and night, for the children of Israel thy servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against thee. Both I and my father's house have sinned. As I stated earlier, Nehemiah left Persia for Jerusalem in 444 BC to be governor of Judah. And this was 13 years before Ezra had arrived there. Nehemiah was deeply burdened for his people and for God's work in Judah. And he poured out his heart to God in fasting and prayer with many tears because of the trouble afflicting God's people in Jerusalem and Judah. And as you read the book of Nehemiah, you'll see in chapter 5 that there were unjust economic inequities among the Jewish people, because the rich were oppressing the poor by making them mortgage their property and borrow money in order to buy food. And in some instances, the poor were being forced to give their children as slaves because of the economic conditions, which was another form of corruption that was going on besides the neglecting of the tithes. Now remember, concerning tithes, the Israelites were required to tithe the produce of the land and the livestock to the Levites and Levite priests, and this was their inheritance. The book of Malachi was written to the Levitical priesthood, who, as I stated earlier, were offering blemished sacrifices to the Lord. And it was written to the Israelites, who, as I stated earlier, neglected the tithes that they were required to give the Levites as their inheritance, as stated in Numbers chapter 18, verses 20 through 28. Numbers chapter 18, verses 20 through 28 reads, And the Lord spake unto Aaron, Thou shalt have no inheritance in their land, neither shalt thou have any part among them. I am thy part and thine inheritance among the children of Israel. And behold, I have given the children of Levi all the tenth in Israel for an inheritance. for their service which they serve, even the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. Neither must the children of Israel henceforth come nigh the tabernacle of the congregation, lest they bear sin and die. But the Levites shall do the service of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they shall bear their iniquity. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations, that among the children of Israel they have no inheritance. But the tithes of the children of Israel, which they offer as an heave offering unto the Lord, I have given to the Levites to inherit. Therefore I have said unto them, among the children of Israel they shall have no inheritance. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Thus speak unto the Levites, and say unto them, When ye take of the children of Israel the tithes which I have given you from them for your inheritance, then ye shall offer up an heave offering of it for the Lord, even a 10th part of the tithe. And this your heave offering shall be reckoned unto you, as though it were the corn of the threshing floor, and as the fullness of the winepress. Thus ye also shall offer an heave offering a heave offering unto the Lord of all your tithes, which ye receive of the children of Israel. And ye shall give thereof the Lord's heave offering to Aaron the priest. Now, in verse 20, the Lord tells Aaron, the brother of Moses, who was a Levitical priest, that the Levites will have no inheritance in the land of the Israelites. Nor will the Levites have any part, or in other words, any share among the Israelites. And the Lord goes on to state that he is their part, or their share, and their inheritance among the Israelites. In verse 21, the Lord states that he has given the Levites all of the 10th in Israel as their inheritance for the work that they do while serving at the tabernacle of the congregation. In verse 22, the Lord states that the Israelites must not go near the tabernacle of the congregation, or they will bear the consequences of their sin and die. In verse 23, the Lord states that the Levites will do the work of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the Levites will bear the responsibility for offenses against it. And the Lord goes on to state that this will be a statute forever throughout their generations, that the Levites have no inheritance among the Israelites. In verse 24, the Lord states that he has given the Levites as their inheritance the tithes that the Israelites offer as a heave offering to the Lord. And the Lord goes on to state that is why he said that the Levites will have no inheritance among the Israelites. Are you with me here? In verse 25, the Lord speaks to Moses. And in verse 26, the Lord tells Moses to tell the Levites that when they take the tithes from the Israelites, which he has given them from the Israelites as their inheritance, they are to offer a tithe or 10th of the tithes that they receive as a heave offering to the Lord. Verse 27 states that their offering will be reckoned to them as though it were the corn of the threshing floor, and as the fullness of the winepress. And verse 28 states that they will offer a heave offering to the Lord out of all of the tithes that they receive from the Israelites. And they are to give their heave offering to Aaron the priest. And these verses further prove that Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 is for the Israelites, because they were to tithe to the Levites, and the Levites would offer a tithe of what they received as a heave offering to the Lord, which they would give to the priests, who would offer the Lord's portion as a burnt offering, and then the Levites would eat the offering as their reward for their service in the tabernacle of the congregation. And this is proven in verses 29 through 32 of Numbers chapter 18, which also shows that the Levites were to offer the best to the Lord as a heave offering, and blemished sacrifices were not acceptable. which is what the Levites were offering to the Lord, as stated in Malachi chapter 1 verse 8, which reads, "And if ye offer the blind for sacrifice, is it not evil? And if ye offer the lame and sick, is it not evil? Offer it now unto thy governor. Will he be pleased with thee, or accept thy person, saith the Lord of hosts?" Numbers chapter 18 verses 29 through 32 reads, "Out of all your gifts ye shall offer every heave offering of the Lord, all the best thereof, even the hallowed part thereof out of it. Therefore thou shalt say unto them, when ye have heaved the best thereof from it, then it shall be counted unto the Levites as the increase of the threshing floor, and as the increase of the winepress. And ye shall eat it in every place, ye and your households, for it is your reward for your service in the tabernacle of the congregation. And ye shall bear no sin by reason of it, when ye have heaved from it the best of it, neither shall ye pollute the holy things of the children of Israel, lest ye die." Now verse 29 says to the Levites that out of all of their gifts that they will offer every heave offering to the Lord out of, they must present the best of it, and the hallowed, or in other words, the holiest part of everything given to them. Verse 30 states that when the Levites offer the best part as a heave offering, it will be counted to the Levites as the increase of the threshing floor, and as the increase of the winepress. And verse 31 states that the Levites and their households will eat the heave offering anywhere, for it is their reward for their service in the tabernacle of the congregation. And verse 32 states that by their presenting the best part of it, they will not bear any sin by reason of it. Or in other words, by presenting the best part of it, they will not be guilty in this matter, and they will not pollute the holy things of the Israelites and die as a result of it. Now, we've dealt with Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 several times so far, because I believe that repetition is an excellent teacher. So in order to make sure that everyone is getting this biblical truth, we will reiterate statements occasionally for those who may have missed the truth the first time. So now we're going to the book of Malachi, so I can give you a breakdown of the entire book of Malachi. Malachi chapter 1, verses 1 through 5 reads, "The burden of the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, saith the Lord. Yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, saith the Lord? Yet I loved Jacob, and I hated Esau, and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. Whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord hath indignation forever. And your eyes shall see, and ye shall say, the Lord will be magnified from the border of Israel." Now Malachi chapter 1 verse 1 states the subject of the first 5 verses, as it states these words: "The burden of the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi," which, as it is stated, it is the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi, which proves that verses 1 through 5 is to Israel as a whole, which is inclusive of the priests. And verse 2 reinforces this fact, as it reads, "I have loved you, saith the Lord. Yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, saith the Lord? Yet I love Jacob." The Lord in verse 2 is stating his love for his people Israel, and the Lord has cared for them over the years. In fact, The Lord chose Jacob and not Esau to inherit the covenant promises and be one of the forefathers of the chosen people from whom the Messiah would come. Jacob's name was changed to Israel by the Lord in Genesis chapter 32 verse 28, which reads, "And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." Israel was birthed out of the loins of Jacob through his 12 sons. And if you remember from the earlier parts of this message, out of the 12 sons of Jacob came the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, we'll see in a minute in verse 6, the subject turns to the priests as Malachi deals with their blemished sacrifices in verses 6 through 14. When the subject turns to the priests only, they are called out, as stated in Malachi chapter 1 verses 6 and 7, which states, "A son honoreth his father, and a servant his master. If then I be a father, where is mine honor? And if I be a master, where is my fear? Saith the Lord of hosts unto you, O priests that despise my name. And ye say, Wherein have we despised thy name? Ye offer polluted bread upon mine altar, and ye say, Wherein have we polluted thee? In that ye say, The table of the Lord is contemptible." Now, did you catch the change up in subject and call out to the priest? In verse 6, it states, "A son honoreth his father, and a servant his master. If I then be a father, where is mine honor? And if I be a master, where is my fear? Saith the Lord of hosts unto you, O priests that despise my name." And what we just read shows the switch in subject from Israel as a whole nation in verses 1 through 5 to the priests in verses 6 through 14. As I just stated, the subject turns to the priests beginning with verses 6 through 14 of Malachi chapter 1, which deals with the corruption of the priesthood and all of the sins that they committed through offering blemished sacrifices. In Malachi chapter 2, verses 1 through 9, Malachi is still dealing with the priests as shown in verse 1, which reads, "And now, O ye priests, this commandment is for you." In verses 6 through 14 of Malachi chapter 1, it deals with the sins of the priests. And in Malachi chapter 2, verses 1 through 9, Malachi deals with the commandment of the Lord to the priests, because the priests had corrupted the ministry to which God had called them.